Welcome to the Voice of Resistance, friend. We are on part 9 of a 12-part series dealing with historic Islam and how it applies today to what we see happening in Iraq with the terrorists of ISIS, what we see with Al-Qaeda, what we see happening in Nigeria, in Egypt, Pakistan. And what we will see today is that without the sword, Islam would fail. I'll tell you a little bit more at the end. Hi friend, I'm Randall Terry. In this session, we're going to talk about Sharia law. What is it? Where did it come from? What are its elements? As you know, we've been studying the life of Muhammad, his words and his deeds that are not in the Quran, properly called the Hadith, or the Sunnah, or the traditions of Muhammad. Well, I'm going to give you a very quick working definition of what Sharia law is now, and then we're going to take a step back and look at the development of Sharia law, how human rights are being abused in nations that practice Sharia law, and ultimately what it is going to take to free the men and women who live under the shadow, the heel, really the sword of Sharia law. Sharia law basically is this. It's the Quran and the Hadith and the Sunnah, the traditions of Muhammad, together enforced by the force of law or by the sword. Muhammad did this. For example, Muhammad ordered people to be murdered or executed who satirized him. So under Sharia law, in an Islamic nation, it is against the law to satirize Muhammad. So again, the simplest kind of bumper sticker definition of Sharia law is this. The Quran and the words and deeds of Muhammad that are not in the Quran, created, codified, and then enforced by the sword. I'm going to make one other statement. It's very critical that you remember this. Islam, if the sword is taken out of its hand, would perish of its own weight. In substance, Islam is a Catholic heresy. In form, it is a revival of the pagan Greco-Roman civil religious structure. In other words, if you were in the countries of Greece or under Roman authority, you had to believe in the political head, but you also had to believe in their gods. And if you denied their gods, you were liable to banishment, imprisonment, some kind of suffering, or even execution. So when Christianity came and ultimately broke the back of the Greco-Roman deities, the ability for the state to compel somebody to worship those pagan deities was over, because the sword had been taken out of the pagan god's hands. Now we name our dogs Caesar. We name our sneakers Nike. We name our cars that'll rust Saturn. The names of these deities that made the world tremble, we don't even recognize that they were, that when we use them in everyday parlance, we don't even recognize that this was a part of the fiber of government that made men fear for their lives. Likewise, Islam, if the sword were taken out of its hand, the ability to compel men to believe, to obey, I think it would die of its own weight. So what we're going to do in this section now is we're going to talk about whether or not Sharia law is compatible with basic human rights, the human rights of freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, and freedom of expression. That's very critical, to express what you believe. Now, as I said, you hear a lot about Sharia law in these days, and my goal now is to give you both background and definitions of Sharia law from the mouths of Muslim scholars. It's critical that we let Islam speak for itself. And then when that has happened, we will see, well, is Sharia law incompatible, completely incompatible with basic human rights? The human rights of freedom of thought, conscience, religion, and expression. Now, there's a philosophical question we also want to ask, and that is this: can a government legitimately force individuals to give up their right to decide or choose their thoughts, their religion, or how they express themselves on those matters? Now, I want you to please take fair warning. Be advised. Our Western and American and Judeo-Christian understanding of human rights, God-given human rights, our understanding is radically different from those of the Muslim world. For example, our Declaration of Independence states, we hold these truths to be self-evident. Self-evident means we don't even need to discuss it. Everyone knows this is true. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Now, this is where we really take a different tack than the Islamic world. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government. That, my friends, is the talk of revolution.